Hey guys, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. This episode today is going to be primarily for our female listeners. We are so excited because we are diving into why hormone symptoms start in the gut. And so I'm Angela.
And I'm Diana, and together we are the Gut Girls.
So imagine this, ladies: 2 periods a month, maybe 3, raging PMS. We get these calls all the time, and a woman's cycle is just looked down upon. Like, I don't want another cycle. I've heard women say, give me the hysterectomy, right, Diana? I mean, we as women have really come to kind of not welcome our cycle. But Diana and I are here today to tell you that your cycle is actually one of your vital signs of health and wellness, and we want you to learn to welcome it. And so we're going to dive in to what is at the root cause of that. Instead of diving into, hey, I might need to get hormone replacement therapy, which we're not saying is a bad thing at a certain time, but to get to the root of it, we're diving into helping you look upstream at the real root cause, right, Diana?
Yeah, and so we want to try to connect these dots for you today. That's sort of what our goal is. It's not necessarily a hormone story or just a hormone story, but it actually is a gut story first. And so, just like we have on past episodes where we've kind of connected you to the nervous system, today we want to kind of connect the hormones and the gut. And so I really we want to dive deep again into those that are maybe having their cycle several times a month and get exhausted by that. And when we look at that on a GI map test, we can actually see this pattern. So again, going back to another episode, when we're looking at things like beta glucuronidase, we're looking at good bacteria being really low. We're looking at overgrowth of Pseudomonas. We're looking at the immune system that's, roughly 80% of our immune system is housed in our gut. And when that is suppressed, so there's these signs and this pattern that shows up. So take us a little bit deeper into some of that.
Yeah, so we actually had a client that came to us that had multiple cycles in a month. Actually, we've had a lot of clients like this. And when we, like Dana's saying, the GI map actually tells a story because we get to see these markers that talk actually a lot about chronic stress. Like you were talking about the immune system. So let's dive into some of these markers and Diana and I are going to tell you like what the story is or can be behind these markers, right? What's the symptom? What's the emotional, thing behind the marker? So secretory IgA. Diana, this is a marker on the GI map that speaks of the immune system. So this is like our first line of defense. And so when it's low, it almost always reflects some kind of chronic stressor. Now, when we talk about chronic stress, that doesn't just mean like the mental load, right? That can also mean chronic environmental stress. That can be, chronic internal health stress, like a inflamed gut. If you have it for years, that's a chronic stressor, right? It could be physical stress. And so it can look like on someone fatigue, this chronic fatigue. It can look like this chronic, I'm constantly catching the colds that my kids bring home and we're constantly sick as a family, but like I'm always sick. It could be that type of symptom or just the typical, hey, my cycles are irregular.
Yeah, so if some of those things sound like you, it's like, all right, I think you've been following us probably long enough to know that we want to make real actionable steps here to help with that. And these are some free things that you can do. They don't cost you a penny to start working on your stress. And one of the first things we do is we're like, well, you got to learn to breathe. And everybody obviously knows how to breathe, but when we really look at it, we were like, okay, are we breathing the right way to help relax our nervous system and drive us back into that parasympathetic state? So one of the things that we talk about doing a lot is doing even some diaphragmatic breathing. And if you've never heard that term, look it up on YouTube, learn how to breathe that way. And when you do that, we suggest breathing like that before you actually eat a meal take a couple of minutes to take those deep breaths so that you can really kind of just allow your body to digest and absorb nutrients the way that we need to. And so I would say breathing is one of the simple actionable steps that you can do to help relieve stress. But then it's also making sure that you're eating enough protein in the day, getting some minerals in. You can do that in through electrolytes or different supplements if you want to. There's obviously some other ways that you can do it, but getting that in first in the first part of the day can really help your body just sort of relieve stress because you're giving it what it actually needs to survive and thrive. And then finally, the having a routine at bedtime is so important to be able to, again, learn to breathe properly, allow your body and your nervous system to just relax so that you can repair and recover overnight. So those are those simple things that I really want to make sure to, encourage you to do at home. So simple, so easy, and it's free to help relieve the stress and hopefully that overall load of the immune system in general. And so let's keep moving forward and talk a little bit more about just estrogen in general. Once we have kind of relieved the stress, if we see some of these other enzymes and things that are high, or maybe somebody says, I feel like I just have so much estrogen, I'm just constantly feeling this way. And they have those heavy periods and the cycles that are coming super frequently. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like on the GI map test, and the possibility of even some of those estrogen overloads to sort of get recycled back into the system.
Yeah. So there's a marker on the GI map called beta glucuronidase that can tell a lot. When it's high, basically you have these estrogens that you're talking about that can make the cycle just feel horrible. What it's going to do is these estrogens are actually tagged to be detoxed from the body. But if this marker is high, it gives us insight that actually those estrogens are getting untagged now and they're getting recycled back through the body. And so that can cause those symptoms that you talked about, both, the PMS and the heavy, cramping, but also some of the mood, like the cycles of the moods that, our irritability and all that goes along with the cycle. And so we get to see that from looking at the gut, guys. I think this is actually so exciting. I kind of geek out with it. And this is where I get to tell, our clients like, hey, again, we are not against hormone replacement therapy, but let's just take this specific circumstance and say that your beta glucuronidase is high. So you are actually pumping some of those, estrogens back into the body, and then you load it up with hormone replacement therapy. Like, what's that going to do, right? Like, that's just going to keep recycling those harmful estrogens. We're going to have more symptoms. And so it's knowing kind of like what's your detoxification like before we put something, synthetic into the body. Let's check out what the body's doing with that detox. And so again, when we talk about like the simple action steps, guys, B vitamins, if you know like the phases of detoxification that the liver goes through, B vitamins are crucial for detoxification. And there's a lot of ways that we don't get B vitamins in. I mean, one is we go back to the protein, right? Just not eating enough protein. There is so many there's so much rich nutrient density of B vitamins in protein. Specifically animal meats, but in protein in general, you can get a lot of B vitamins. And so if you're not getting enough protein in, that's one thing. But then we're even going to take this a step farther. Diana, I want to kind of jump into the next one because these go off of each other. We had talked about dysbiosis. So like you had mentioned, in the introduction, things like overgrowth of Pseudomonas. Okay. This is a bacteria. You guys don't have to know what it is, but it's a bacteria that when it's high in the gut, it actually can ferment protein. So you might even be eating all the protein right now. And so you're listening to this and you're like, oh guys, that doesn't apply to me. I'm eating all the protein. But I actually see this quite a lot where, okay, but you have this bacteria that's fermenting it. So actually, you're not even getting all the protein that you're eating right now. It's almost like you're working so hard to keep on track of your protein, but what's happening inside that we don't get to see is you're not breaking it down. Therefore, you're not absorbing it. Therefore, you're not metabolizing those B vitamins. You're not using them, right? So then if we know that, now all the hard work that you're putting in can actually pay off when we kind of work to shift this microbiome a little bit better.
Yeah, so when we say this word dysbiosis, that's not something that you use in your everyday language. But when we look at a stool test and at a GI map test and we see these results come out and we see this dysbiosis where, maybe there's an imbalance of the good bacteria, and then we see this overgrowth of sort of the opportunistic guys, like you're saying, you're using the word Pseudomonas. I know a lot of our listeners don't know that word, but when we look at that stool test, we can actually see that this lady is probably struggling losing weight. I bet she is like, I am doing everything right and I cannot lose weight. My face is broken out, or maybe during their cycle they have like a lot of breast tenderness or something like that. We can see that on the stool test, even a lot of times without talking to the person, we can see that. And so if that's you, one of the things that we would tell you is so obvious. Cut back on sugar a little bit. And make sure that you're really eating a balanced diet as much as possible, especially around that cycle, that there's not a sugar overload, which is hard because a lot of times during the cycle, that's when we really, really want it. And so as much as you feel like you want to do it at that time, that's actually kind of the wrong time to do it. We want to focus on, getting to 20 to 30 grams of protein in at each meal. And if you feel like that's you, where you have that weight gain and you feel kind of this inflamed feeling all the time, it may be that overgrowth. So you may need a coach like us, or another kind of practitioner or something that might say, hey, we need to go through a phase. I would suggest that you look at some antimicrobials. And so we kind of break that down and then build your gut back up again, kind of repair it again with specific probiotics, with polyphenols and different food groups and things. And we look at things, moving on a little bit, Angela, we look at things like butyrate. Tell us a little bit about fiber, about butyrate, these kind of like prebiotic, postbiotic, probiotic, all of that a little bit, so that to help us understand how that all works with blood sugar and what that looks like on the stool test. If you can kind of give us an idea of that.
Yeah, and butyrate might be foreign to some people, but I'm going to say a term that everyone's very aware of, which is like the hormone GLP-1, right? So if that catches your attention, you might want to listen to this part. So butyrate comes from these short chain fatty acids that our body produces. They come from the good bacteria. So the, probiotics that Diana just mentioned that we have. And when we have enough good bacteria, then we produce, the short chain fatty acids, or the butyrate, and it helps regulate, I would say, like blood sugar regulation, and the metabolism, like where GLP-1 kind of steps in and helps with like that stubborn weight loss. So let me go back to a second, because you had said, Diana, something that's really important. When we are on our cycle, that is when we actually do crave a lot of sugar. And I would say this right here, when this is set up well, it can actually be more than just willpower. Like sometimes we're like, man, I don't have enough willpower to resist that chocolate after dinner. Okay, it's not about that. You're what it is, like, remember that saying of you are what you eat, right? So if you're constantly feeding the bad, bugs, they're going to crave stuff that you don't have the willpower to tell them no. I mean, they speak, right? That's what your cravings are. So when you have a diverse, profile of good bacteria, then you actually have more regulation of blood sugar, which then helps you not have the cravings, which then takes willpower out of the, equation. And then you've got the metabolism because you're producing your own GLP-1 hormone, like amazing, right? But if I take this back a notch, we actually see a lot of women with low good bacteria. I mean, it's just tanked, right? And so this actually goes back to that like chronic stress response, right? Where again, we mentioned it's not always just mental stress. It's not always just environmental. It could be physical. It could be internal. But it gets blunted. When there's a lot of inflammation, no one's going to start producing their own GLP-1 hormone when there's a lot of inflammation, right? So really that diversity of good bacteria is key. But then I'll also mention one thing. If you guys are listening to this, you're probably thinking like, okay, well, I need to start eating more cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage and all those, fibers that we think about when it comes to diversity of food. And I would say just halt for a second, because if you are inflamed and you aren't detoxifying well, to jump into a lot of raw, colorful vegetables might actually set you into more of a spiral. What we really coach you through, this is what we really take pride in, is kind of like, hey, let's slow down. Let's get the digestion flowing with cooked veggies, right? Let's start with all cooked, because there's probably a kink in the hose. And so just jumping into a lot of fiber is actually going to make you more bloated, probably running to the bathroom even more. So let's start with all of our veggies cooked. Let's actually pull away from some of those really hard to eat vegetables. Maybe do a little less broccoli here and add in more resistant starch fiber, which some of you may be like, what is that? That's a whole different category of fiber that you can get from like cooked and cooled sweet potatoes and rice, maybe some green bananas, green plantains, and other foods like that maybe you're like, oh, I didn't even think of those as a fiber source, right? I was thinking of just nuts and seeds and broccoli and Brussels sprouts. So we really do dive into teaching you what doing diversity well should look like. That's what we kind of really harp on in some of the coaching calls that you do with us in the Gut Girls membership.
Yeah, so, as you were talking, I was thinking back to 2017 when I felt like I was doing everything right. I was like, man, I'm eating broccoli. I'm preparing my food ahead of time. And so this is where it makes it a little bit challenging, because you're like, I'm doing all the things. And this is where we say, pulling the GI map test in can be sort of a good chunk of the piece of the puzzle for you to pull your whole picture together a little bit. And so tell us a little bit, there's this term that if people think, okay, maybe I have connected digestion to my hormones and, kind of pulled those two together. Tell us a little bit about digestive enzymes, what that means, why that's important, and what that looks like on the stool test, because that is a term that I feel like people say, I don't know, maybe I need some probiotics or digestive enzymes or whatever. And I'm like, do you even know, what those do? And let's talk about whether or not you need them. And so tell us a little bit about that marker on the test and a little bit more about how that plays into our hormones.
Yeah, there's a marker on the test called elastase-1, which speaks of your pancreatic output for digestive enzymes. The pancreas also puts out, insulin, but one side of the pancreas is that digestive component. And it's interesting because some people will come to us and they're extremely bloated, and we get their GI map back and their elastase-1 is actually amazing. And so it's like, hey, it's not a pancreatic output issue, but is it another digestive juice? Is it maybe just like the hydrochloric acid is off versus just the pancreatic enzyme? And I think that a lot of people, we're probably now talking like Spanish to them, like, wait, what? There's how many digestive, pathways in the body? That there's so many. So you're right to say the GI map can sometimes hone in on that one specific like missing piece of the puzzle. But I will say we see a lot of that elastase low when think of someone, it could be as simple, Diana, as like someone not chewing their food well, someone who's just like, I am on the go, I'm eating my food fast, I don't actually even taste the meal, I just swallow it. It could be that, to where, okay, do you guys realize that as you chew your food, the saliva actually starts breaking down carbohydrates in the mouth instantly. And then that saliva actually starts sending signals downstream to the pancreas to say, hey, food is coming. Like, I've got it up here in the oral cavity. I'm working it, but food is coming. Start secreting enzymes so you can help with this, digestive process right now. So guys, it could be as simple as that. If you start chewing your food, you actually allow for more natural juices to be secreted lower downstream. So something that simple. I would also go into, Diana, some of like the things that we teach in our basics guide, which you guys can all get on our website it's absolutely free. Jump on there today and get it. But some of the things we teach in our basics guide, like protein first, right? Like even in the morning, okay, protein before caffeine. If you think about it, something as simple as if I wake up and I'm just chugging coffee right away, when I'm drinking coffee, it's a stimulant, okay? And so I'm putting my body into this fight or flight mode. guys, remember when you're in fight or flight, you're not in rest and digest, right? So you're starting your day in that fight or flight mode. So then there goes, what meal do you have? Like breakfast, right? Next. So like I just had my coffee. Now I'm about to eat breakfast. You're not really setting yourself up for digestion, no matter if it's the best breakfast in the world, right? So we usually say about 25 to 30 grams of protein for breakfast if you can get it in. But if you guys are like, what does that look like? Dinah, we teach the hand diagram. Do you want to walk them through what the hand diagram looks like for, hey, this is what each meal should be, but we'll talk about breakfast right now.
Yeah, so it's really pretty simple. Your hand goes with you everywhere. So I know there are lots of different, fad diets and different things on the market. And I'm not saying those don't work, but the good thing is that your hand goes with you everywhere. So when we talk about protein, for those of you that are actually watching me, we're looking at the palm of our hand and kind of drawing a circle around the palm of our hand. And that's sort of the amount of protein that you're looking to get with each meal. And then you're using your thumbs to get in your fat. And then you're going to do a cupped palm for your carbohydrates. And then you can do like a loose fist sort of, and that would be your veggies, your fibers. A lot of times there's a picture I think out there somewhere that we have ours as that loose palm is spinach with mushrooms, tomatoes. So that's really a lot of your fibrous foods, some of those polyphenols maybe kind of mixed in there. So that kind of gives you a pretty rainbow looking plate when you pull all of that together. So again, you can go to our basics guide and look at that hand diagram, and we walk you through it on the basics guide. So you can say, oh, okay, and I understand what Diana was talking about. So if you're driving down the road and you can't see my hand, then you can go to that basics guide once you get somewhere parked. And so hopefully that's helpful to just kind of pull together a little bit of a meal. And we try to do that even with our kids taking their lunches, right? We try to pull that whole sort of plate idea together a little bit. So that's why, with all of my girls, we make sure that there's some sort of protein in there. We don't want just a bunch of carbohydrates pulled together. So we really try to focus on that, even if we're eating out or, in any case, because that's really what's going to help regulate hormones, make you feel satiated, make you feel full, and really make you sleep well at night, feel energized in the morning. So that's why we focus on protein so much.
Yeah. And then just to kind of go a little bit further after that is, we talk a lot about just taking, like you had mentioned it once, but I'll repeat it because it's so important and it's overlooked, but taking a minute before you eat to breathe. Kind of like prepare yourself for, hey, this is eating time, right? If you don't tell your body it's eating time, it's going to keep going in that go mode. So like, hey, this is eating time. I'm going to switch, to that by breathing. And then maybe after the meal, Diana's really good about preaching about, hey, get up and do like a little walk. If it's around your neighborhood, Diana's constantly, if you guys live in Tennessee, you're seeing her walk up and down her driveway often. I'll be calling her and she's like, I'm just walking up and down my driveway. So just getting out, to get some of that digestive flowing with a little bit of movement. Remember, movement is like a massage. It's like a natural massage to the intestinal tract, right? So a little bit of movement. I'm not saying go, run a marathon after a meal, but just some gentle movement stimulation can really help. So we talked about the food. We talked about, setting yourself up for a healthy meal with the breathing. We talked about a little bit of activity after. I mean, honestly, such a mini protocol, but yet so powerful when it comes to hormonal health. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. And using things like you'll hear me kind of preach on this end of like, hey, use like a little bit of like ginger tea after a meal to help with digestion. Because if digestion is not well, guys, the hormones are not well, right? We don't get the foundation of the fats, the healthy omegas that speak into our hormones, the B vitamins that speak into our hormonal health and all that. So we really do focus on starting with the gut, kind of as like your GPS, right, for hormonal health.
Yeah, we've talked a lot today about different signals. I know some of the things where we talk about elastase markers and beta glucuronidase, and those are some big markers that we see on the stool test, on the GI map test. But really, when it comes down to it, the signals that your body is giving you, where you're having 2 cycles per month, it is common. but it's not normal. And so, those signals where you're really raging PMS, that is something that you're like, I wonder how my detoxification pathways look like, So if this is maybe the last piece of the puzzle for you, Angela, where should they go if they're like, man, I think I really need to start with this GI map test? Some of these hormonal things, I'm getting face breakouts a lot. Maybe my skin is dry. They have these different symptoms that are popping up, and trying to Dr. Google everything. Tell them a little bit about how they could work with us.
Yeah, so right now, I encourage you guys, if this is speaking to you, jump over to our website. And we have right now a button on there that you can book a free 15-minute with us. So we really get to take that time, understand your story, where you've been struggling. And a lot of times what's so fun is Diana can be like, oh man, we're already picturing, what that GI map is going to look like based on some of what you're telling us. So jump on over there to our website, book your free 15, and we would love to get started with you guys.
We'll catch you on the next episode. The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.